Good afternoon. So we're going to call this meeting to order. It's the special council meeting, special council committee on the Economic Development, Infrastructure, Budget, and Technology Committee. It's October 22nd, 4/12. I'm going to call this meeting to order. If we could have roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Chair.
Present.
Councilmember Benavides.
On his way.
Thank you. Councilmember Sarmiento.
Here.
Great, thank you so very much. Any public comments? Did we receive anybody from the public that wishes to speak? No, okay. We are going to move forward and let's see if, I know some of these items are council. First quarter general fund update. Yes. Sergio.
Caught him
I know,
sneezing.
caught you off guard here, because like I gotta wait till Councilman Benavides shows up.
Sure.
And Ted, if you're on there, we're just waiting for another council member. Didn't want you to repeat yourself, so if you can bear with me, he is literally nearby.
Absolutely, thank you.
Great.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. Good afternoon. I thought my voice could carry, but I guess it does not. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. Good afternoon, Councilmember Sarmiento. Please report to you the item this evening, item number 5 on today's edit committee meeting is our first quarter update for the general fund for fiscal year 18-19. Is it? There it is. So this is a quick agenda for today's meeting. We're going to give you a quick general fund budget summary, just to kind of give an update to the folks here and to the committee, an update of what was adopted in June, July for this upcoming fiscal year, or this current fiscal year, 18-19. We'll also provide a quick update on the general fund first quarter revenue and also the first quarter expenditures, and update on the first quarter vacancy report through September 30th, and just a little elaboration on the next steps for upcoming financial information for the current year for the city. As discussed, the city did adopt a budget of $264.6 million in expenditures. Conversely, we had a $254.4 million revenue adoption. To close the gap, the structural deficit, $10.2 million, and that was really from the use of unassigned fund balance for the city for the current fiscal year. And as we go through our first quarter revenues, again, I really want to highlight is our first quarter really depicts historically, in that table to your right, it reflects 3 years of historical trends, 17-18, 16-17, and fiscal year 15-16, of what we on average have received during the first quarter. Overall, the city's total revenues for the general fund are at 9.6, so it's approximately in line of that 10%. Specifically in our sales tax, that depicts 3.9 million 1 month's receipts, or really in September. If we look at it overall basis, last year we received 3.6, so we have seen a slight increase. And again, I just want to remind folks is that the CDTFA, or the former Board of Equalization, did not provide some receipts for fiscal year 17-18. So we may be seeing that here today. Unfortunately, they're unable to delineate between 18-19 and 17-18, so we're going to be recording them in accordance with accounting standards at 3.9 million. Property tax and also property tax in lieu of VLF, typically those revenues are received in December and May of the fiscal year, so at this time it's in line that we wouldn't receive any revenues at this time, or very minor.
So just very quickly on the incremental revenue, are those all the various TRAs or tax increment? Can you explain that, the incremental revenue that we receive from the property tax, beyond just the general tax, and then there's incremental tax?
So we receive, I think, the incremental taxes from the various project areas in the city, and we also receive some residual revenue as a result of the city being a pass-through entity of the former redevelopment agency, or now commonly known as a successor agency. Typically for the TRA and that specific residual, the city receives about 18% of the residual revenue from the old tax increment, or the old we call them RDA, but
RDA,
redevelopment
yes.
agency, just to be
Yes.
clear here for everyone.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
old Santa Ana Redevelopment Agency.
At what point does that end? As you know, the incremental tax is much more than the general, the revenue that goes to the general fund. And so will we see that eventually stabilize as we phase out of redevelopment? Is there a sunset or deadline on some of those tax increments as considered to redevelopment? I just have that question because I was just reviewing, and I have a presentation in a couple hours, and as I was doing my research and trying to figure out, so here the general fund revenue is 34 and then
31.
66 on the incremental revenue, right? So I at what point in time, and that was my question, I was trying to do research, I said, well, what part, how much of it is coming from the redevelopment?
So Redevelopment Agency, as you're aware, dissolved in 2012, or officially February 2012, as a result of AB 26 and 27. To answer your question, there is a sunset. You are correct, Mayor Pro Tem. That is in 2031. So hang on for now, but it's about we're making our way there. 12 years. I mean, but I'm happy to report also that the city did refinance tax allocation bonds for the former redevelopment agency or the successor agency. So that should assist in that small component, of course, but assistance in increasing the residual revenue for the city through the life of the debt service. But yes, 2031. That's
And
that's
I asked that question as we're going to be talking about other potential opportunities, and I'm a nerd. This whole weekend, I actually spent about 12 hours doing this research and trying to figure out as we're going to have this conversation today, and realize I'm certain we have a sunset, but none of in the research I did would talk about any sunsets. So great, I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And just real quick on utility users tax, or otherwise known as UT, that reflects 2 months of receipts. Business license, again, little shallow. However, the majority of the revenues for business license come in that March-April period, when mainly the professional service folks and the gross receipt folks are submitting their business license. And hotel visitors tax, that actually represents 2 months, July and August. If you look at the 2 month basis, this does reflect the cities or the regions, really the busy travel season. So, we'll continue monitoring if this is a continued uptick in the revenues as well. And then the other general fund revenues, we have a upcoming slide here to go a little more in detail on that. The jail revenue, this is $2.2 million. Again, this reflects what the city has collected through September 30th. Obviously, if we receive the billing, or we include the billing, we're about $3.9 million for 3 months. So it's on target with the budgeted about $16 million. Commercial cannabis, as you're aware, and we have an upcoming slide on the expense side of the equation here. But to date, the city's not yet implemented that plan, but we're going to be working and reporting back out to the committee and to council as well as to the status. Adult use retail, again, this reflects 2 months or 7 months of the program in itself if we include 17-18. In 17-18, about $2.5 million. In the following 2 months, $700,000. So we are seeing a continued increase, slight, but a continued increase in adult use retail cannabis. Medical marijuana, we're probably seeing a more maturing, that it's going to be in that about $170,000, $200,000 monthly range. So we're going to be in that 2.5 range in receipts. But again, as discussed, we'll be going ahead and reporting back to the committee as well. Plan checks and the following building permits. With the exception of plan checks, we are seeing an increase in our permit activity here just on a 3 month basis. And this is the sole revenue here that is reflective of 3 months, or July, August, and September. So we're going to continue monitoring that and seeing if this is a continuous pattern throughout the fiscal year. But at least through the first quarter, this is a positive sign. On expenditures, again, I want to reiterate here, the main focus is July, what has been paid through July through September, or about a quarter of the year that has been completed right now. And if you look to the column to your right, The city typically does pay its expenses on about 24 to 25% every quarter. So if you look at the overall on the bottom right, this the overall general fund budget. We've expended about 24%, 23.9. Just some real quick anomalies here I just do want to point out is obviously on our clerk of the council, the majority of the expenses is related to the election, and those expenditures should be paid by mid-year, or it's anticipated to. City attorney, obviously, as we get our contracts and invoicing, they're more than likely in arrears after the service provided after September 30th. Every department is in line. Obviously, you do see that little spike in fire, but that's really as a result of 4 payments, July through October. And we pay that in accordance with the contract that does require a payment in advance for the city prior to the month, beginning of the month. Our vacancy report, I think I like to think of it walking from right to left. Overall vacancies for the city, this includes general fund and non-general fund, is 191 vacancies. If you consider what is the funded vacancies, about 134. 57 are unfunded. And if you go to the general fund, a little more detail, 51 vacancies for the police department, which comprises the majority of the 77 total general fund vacancies. And really of those funded general fund vacancies, and specifically within the police department, 35 are with police officers. Next steps, as we discussed, we're presenting here this evening. We'll also this week just as a quick reminder, we'll be conducting our Sunshine Ordinance meeting, or otherwise known as a community budget presentation. This is our October presentation, and likewise we do that in March as well. We'll also be coming back to the City Council as a whole in November to provide maybe a quick update similar to this presentation. Little more background on where the revenue stood. We may make some adjustments in terms of what we saw coming in October, what was incurred in October, and maybe calculate those and incorporate those into the presentation through September. And we'll also come back and do the budget calendar to give everyone the update on the upcoming fiscal year's budget in 1920. And likewise, I think this is a really key point, in January, February, we'll be coming back to doing the mid-year general fund budget update as well, to kind of give a status of where we are at a mid-year point and give us a little more outlook on the city at the mid-year point. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Yes, a couple of questions. Thank
Yes,
you, Member Tim.
Commissioner.
Mr. Vidal, a couple of questions that you have, and I apologize for my delay in walking in. You may have touched on my question earlier on in the presentation. You mentioned as we got to expenditures. Expenditures generally the organization has more control over, so those we can predict. Those we generally don't have too many surprises. You pointed a couple of anomalies, if you will, and there was an explanation behind those. When it comes to the revenue, anything in particular that does stood out that we may have not anticipated on either side, I'm more concerned or interested about any gaps in funding that we may have anticipated in our budget. But if we have anything that is on the positive that we didn't anticipate, that would be. I'm interested in getting that information as well. But again, anything that might make it so that at the end of the year we might be short in a particular line item when it comes to revenue.
Sure. When it comes to the revenues, I think really the sales tax, obviously it's not straight line, so we're not going to consistently receive $3.9 million every month. So what the sales tax here represents is 1 month, or specifically what the city received in September. But just on a year-over-year basis, we received last year 3.6 for the same time period. So it's an increase of 300,000. Unfortunately, we're unable, or CDTFA is unable to say, hey, this is related to 1718, or this is a true reflection of the business activity or the sales tax receipts for businesses in the city for July. But at least it's a positive. It's 300,000 more on a year-over-year basis. So that's something that we're going to monitor. Our property tax, at this time, unfortunately, we're unable to determine right now where we'll be. But just given assessed valuation in the last 3 years, where we've seen about a 3 to 4% growth, and we are conservative in our budgeted projections, we're hopefully anticipating to see that continued growth in property tax, and we'll really know once we come back in mid-year when we do have the December receipts. UUT, obviously, we're still unfortunately seeing the effects of this. This is 2 months, so I kind of look at it as, okay, this is about $2.3 million for 2 months. Obviously since we are subject to climate with the water, electricity, and gas, is this a reflection of higher demand in a more of a peak time period? And how would that impact in the lower heat or different seasonal climate? So that's why right now, I think on a year-over-year basis, we are monitoring this and hoping to report back. But I will say one thing is hotel visitors tax for 2 months, we've already received 21% of our budgeted revenue. Again, that is the summer travel season. So that's pretty good. But we'll see on our non-peak season how the city does, and we could really report back in mid-year update, really get back to your question of where we are. But obviously, with our cannabis revenue on the other general fund, which is of slide 5, the permits, with the exception of plan checks, but the permits, we are seeing a pretty dramatic increase. That is reflective of 3 months of activity. So that's obviously if we're just doing straight line, it would be at about 25%, but you could see they're about 34% on both electrical and heating. So that is a positive sign. But definitely the cannabis, we want to continue monitoring since it is in its infancy stage. How does adult use impact medical marijuana or vice versa? And when both of those are in the market and they're available for consumers. So we want to, once we get that 6 month, we can have 1 full year of adult use and really determine, say, hey, look, this is really where we're trending. This is what we've seen on a monthly basis, and provide more historical guidance for upcoming future revenue projections regarding to cannabis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to be moving towards number 2, the Affordable Housing Funding Solutions. Presenting is Ted Chandler, who's on the phone, and of course Ernesto Medrano. I wanted to bring this item forward as we continue to talk about housing solutions and how do we fund, and looking at innovative and creative partnerships. And as a city, not too long ago, entered into a project labor agreement. This was a perfect opportunity to have a conversation with our partners and figuring out how can we leverage this partnership and look at building housing. As we all know, that building affordable housing is not easy, and there's always this financing gap, and how do we find other creative ways? And this is one of the ways, and so wanted to bring them here to present to the council, and I'm going to introduce Ernesto Medrano, and he's going to introduce Ted.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, executive staff. My name is Ernesto Medrano, and I'm with the Los Angeles Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. You're probably wondering, well, what's a guy that builds doing up here? And we're going to talk a little bit about that, because there's more than that. You were very happy, very pleased, and proud of the relationship and the partnership that we built with the city. Actually, the first municipal agreement that we have done in the history of the county, where we are able to provide a skilled and trained workforce, local hire, veteran preferences, no strike, no lockout for efficiency. And so we thought that we can talk a little bit more now, because this is just not that. One of the things that our affiliates do is they negotiate pension plans, and they're able to put away money. So when our members retire in the future, they've got a security, a safety way to be able to retire and provide for their families. Because when you're in construction, you're not going to work all your life in construction, because your body gets beat up pretty bad. So we want to have some healthy and robust pension plans. But in the meantime, those plans could become of use. And so with that, we do a lot of work within investing those pension plans, and particularly within the housing affordability world. So I'll stop there, because by trade I am a Teamster. In college I unloaded trucks. I'm not a finance guy, and that's why we have our Chief Operating Officer of the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust, Ted Chandler, on the phone. So Ted, you want to carry us with the presentation that was given out to the council members?
Well, thank you, Ernesto, and Madam Chair, members of the council. Thank you for having me on the phone to present on the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. Recently, the City of Santa Ana issued a request for proposals for affordable housing, including land that's owned by the Housing Authority. And as the Councilwoman pointed out with the citywide PLA, there are opportunities with city agencies, opportunities for a fund such as ours, which invests in construction projects that are built with 100% union labor. We are a mutual fund. We are a mutual fund like you see in the newspaper. You may invest in like a Fidelity or a Vanguard, but we're different in that we are open to investment only by union members. And we are about a $5.8 billion fund, and we have some of the details on that in the PowerPoint presentation that I'll be going through that's in your packages. So we were started by the AFL-CIO as a loan fund in the early 1960s, and it was an outgrowth of conversations between AFL President George Meany and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King about how the labor movement and the civil rights movement could work together. And one way in which they identified that the two movements could work together was to put labor's capital to a productive social purpose. And in our case, that purpose is to invest the pension fund money in building affordable housing with union labor. We became the mutual fund in 1984, and we are not a department of the AFL-CIO, and now we're not owned by the AFL-CIO. We're owned by the 400 union funds around the country that are our shareholders. Union pension funds and other union funds invest with us. They invest with us, they invest their pension funds with us because we are a high credit quality investment. We invest in government-backed bonds and high credit quality loans because this is pension fund money, and we're organized on the belief that we should earn a competitive rate of return so that the money is there to pay the benefits for the members when they retire. But in the meantime, we should be putting those funds to a productive social purpose. So we're focused on earning a market competitive return, but in getting affordable housing built. If you look at page 2 of that PowerPoint presentation, you'll see the impact we've been able to have in the more than 30 years that we have been around. We've generated close to $30 billion in total economic activity, and that represents more than $19 billion of total development investment, exclusively in the development of housing, and primarily rental housing, 99% of it rental housing. We're not limited to affordable housing, but about 2/3 of the housing units that we finance do have income restrictions on them. Low-income housing tax credits are invested in them that are so that the units are affordable to people with limited income. That's that primary tool for affordability, but we're not limited to affordable housing. At the same time, we keep very close track of the jobs that we create and the union jobs that we create. And we've created more than 167 million hours of union construction work. And that goes along with building about 110,000 units of housing. The concept is laid out in a graphical form there on page 3 of the presentation. If you look at the upper left-hand box there, you'll see it starts with the union pension fund investing in the Housing Investment Trust. We invest those funds in developing the affordable housing and apartment buildings. We're investing through the government-backed securities that provide income. They provide a return. By using union labor, it means that union members are going to work, they're earning the benefits, they're earning the pension contributions that they make to the pension funds. And so the cycle continues with the union pension funds being able to invest those benefits back into the HIT. So page 4, you see just a summary of both the competitive returns as well as the collateral benefits through the investments that we make. We directly source these investments by working with cities, with policymakers to identify developments like the Housing Authority developments that have been put out for an RFP by City of Santa Ana, by working directly with developers and their lenders on how we can be the most competitive investor. We're competing with Wall Street many times for these securities, and the way in which we win the business on the financial side is we're willing to customize the financing that we bring. Whereas Wall Street is a large machine, it's a cookie-cutter machine when it comes to the kinds of bonds that are used for affordable housing. Because we are smaller and we can focus on the individual transactions, the individual deals, we bring a benefit to the finance. It saves the development money. And when it saves the development money on an affordable housing development, that means that the city, the public, has to put in less gap financing, as the councilwoman referred to. And you can see some pictures of some recent investments in California on that page. If you go to slide 5 on the presentation, I walked through the specific hiring requirements that we have. Again, we are an investor in developments that are built with 100% union labor. Many of the public projects have hiring requirements that align with those requirements. Of course, anything that's built by a public agency will have a prevailing wage requirement, but oftentimes affordable housing will even go beyond that. Public housing developments have HUD Section 3 requirements. Those are requirements that the agency, the Housing Authority, uses its best efforts to make sure that residents and low-income residents of the surrounding area have priority in terms of getting the construction jobs that are created by those projects. We work very closely with the building trades on helping those agencies meet those requirements and meet our requirements for the 100% union labor. It's a terrific opportunity for communities to get low-income residents access to apprenticeships through pre-apprenticeship programs, because the unions know the work will be there for the trainees through the project labor agreements that you have authorized and have entered into. That's when the building trades can say, we know we can open up slots for people because we know there's going to be work for them over a long period of time. Someone's going to have a 30-year career in the building trades. You want to know that there's sufficient work to keep them employed. So the pre-apprenticeship programs that Santa Ana is already working on with the building trades are a great way for low-income residents to have access. And I go through a few of the requirements that are sometimes in bid language, responsible bidder language, having contractors who participate in a state-registered apprenticeship program, and perhaps most importantly from your perspective, contractors who can assign people who are local, who by zip code qualify to meet local hire provisions. And I know the LA Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council is expert in that and works closely with you. Many communities also have MVE, WVE, minority contractor goals, provisions, and the trades have a very good set of contractors to meet those requirements, and we work closely with them so that general contractors know they're there and have access to them. But I wanted you to have in front of you an example of how this entire partnership has worked with housing authorities in other parts of the country. Many housing authorities have entered into project labor agreements with the building trades. In the West Coast, in Seattle, San Francisco, across the country. And the example I pulled out for you here is with the Boston Housing Authority, which created an apprenticeship preparation program for its residents in partnership with their Building and Construction Trades Council. The project labor agreement provides for pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship opportunities to be made available to the residents of the Housing Authority properties to area low-income residents, so that the construction job opportunities could be there for those trainees, so that they could meet the Section 3 local hire requirements, not by a short-term job, not by someone having a 3 or 4 week job or a 1 week training program, but by having an opportunity to enter into an apprenticeship and have a career in the building trade. Now, at the same time, while there's the labor side of it, we bring the capital. So to this development, the Housing Authority's Old Colony development, we brought more than $60 million to the $118 million cost of the development. The redevelopment created 245 new public housing units, as well as more than 600 union construction jobs. So far, the apprenticeship program, pre-apprenticeship program that the Housing Authority set up has gotten 54 low-income residents into union apprenticeships. Every one of those people who got a union apprenticeship and makes their way through an apprenticeship represents a family that is never going to need affordable housing. So from where I sit, the investment and the partnership with the building trades created not only the 245 public housing units, it also meant that 54 other families did not need to qualify, did not need to become residents of public housing or other affordable housing. Effectively, called 299 families were able to get housing that was affordable to them thanks to this partnership. And that's how Section 3 is supposed to work, of course. It's supposed to get people the opportunity so that they can advance to the middle class. And what that does is open up the affordable housing to families behind them. The last presentation slide that I have here goes through some of recent policy successes that we've had in Southern California on affordable housing development. Last year, Metro extended their project labor agreement to include housing developments on Metro real estate that are more than 60 units total. And you may have heard of the proposition, HHH, that passed in Los Angeles to provide $1.2 billion for affordable housing, primarily supportive housing, permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Last year, the council the city council, adopted the PLA for that affordable housing subsidy money to apply to any such development, any development receiving that money that is for 65 units or more to have sufficient scale there. And just last week, in fact, late last week, the council enacted an extension of that project labor agreement to a new linkage fee that the city of Los Angeles has put in for development. So, in fact, that PLA will apply to any housing development subsidized by their linkage fee in addition to the $1.2 billion Triple H. And in 2016, another proposition was passed in LA to require the use of a skilled and trained workforce along with inclusionary housing, affordable housing, for housing developments that need zoning changes in LA. And that will have many responsible contractors being able to participate and will help expand access to apprenticeships for residents of the city as well. There are also local hire provisions that go along with that. So those are some recent examples of where policymakers, either directly on the council or through agencies such as Metro, on whose board they sit, or through the voters directly through the propositions like JJJ, have expanded the use of a skilled and trained workforce, have provided for pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship training for local residents, local low-income residents, on housing developments built on public property or that are being subsidized with public funds. So it's great progress in looking at the development of affordable housing as not just the bricks and sticks that house the families, low-income families, but also a larger strategy of how to lift people into the middle class by giving them access to apprenticeships, because of the commitments that are made to build with union labor and with a skilled and trained workforce. So I will pause there. I'm happy to take any questions that members of the council may have.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate the presentation. I'll open up to my colleagues and city staff for questions for Ted. Councilman Benavides?
A question. Thank you, Ted, for the presentation, Ernesto, as well, bringing this before us. One question, I realize that the name here of the trust, the Housing Investment Trust, do you do other types of investment or provide capital for other municipal or other projects and other municipal projects? And or does that? I'm curious to whether AFL-CIO has other similar. I know we'll talk some more about housing, but I'm just curious whether they have a similar trusts that provide funding for other sorts of infrastructure, if, again, other just general projects, stadiums, community centers, other types of projects that would be again within municipalities, but outside of housing. That was one question that I have, and then
Okay.
I'll bring it back to the housing as well as a follow-up.
Okay, we within the Housing Investment Trust do not invest in public capital investment projects. There is another union sponsored fund that has an infrastructure fund that invests in income producing public projects. They recently invested in a water treatment plant, I believe it is. Is that in the Inland Empire? Ernesto, I don't know if you recall which that may be. It may have been in Rialto. About a $30 million project. We at the Housing Investment Trust have a subsidiary that invests new market tax credits in commercial development. And in fact, you remind me, Councilman, that we have invested in a school headquarters building, an administrative building, in partnership with the city. So I misspoke when I said we do not invest in public capital projects. We have invested in new market tax credits in one. If you're familiar with new markets tax credits, you know that their special companies receive these allocations on an annual basis from the federal government. So we've applied for more. We'd love an opportunity to invest in a new market tax credit transaction for a capital project or otherwise in the city of Santa Ana that's built with union labor.
Okay, that's helpful. That was basically where I was going. So it's helpful just to know that for other potential. I've got a few ideas in mind, but for another conversation, I'll bring it back. See if any other my colleagues have questions.
Yeah, hi Ted. This is Vince, and thank you for addressing our committee, and thank you, Ernesto, for bringing Ted. I know we've had this conversation before about how do we work a little bit closer together. Talk to me about number 75. It says Baker Square, Santa Ana, 90 units, 2.9 million was a commitment, and the total development cost was about 3.2. Who did you all work with on that project here? Because that's the only one that I see in town.
That project was built in the 1980s. And I don't know who the developer was, but that's why at that time you could get 90 units with a $3 million loan, $3.2 million total development cost.
I was going to say, can you do that for us again?
Well, you can be proud that there are only two developments that we financed in Orange County, and one there in Santa Ana. I wish we could get to $30,000, $35,000 per unit these days, but the labor movement has a long history of not only the finance and the construction, but also being a nonprofit co-sponsor of affordable housing development. And we financed many affordable housing developments through the old HUD programs in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Our predecessor funded the 60s and 70s and us in the 80s. And that's what that is. It's long ago HUD-sponsored transaction, which these days, of course, low-income housing tax credits that are the primary use.
Got it. Thanks. And this next question is more for staff, just to get their thoughts on how something like this, could be assembled, could be proposed, as we see that, some of our monies have been, some of our in lieu monies have been used for other purposes, how we backfill that, how we use maybe other sources like this to develop a more affordable units. And I think, what I'm hearing from you, Ted, and I know that, with Ernesto, our conversations have been, there's a quantifiable way to see these monies as another investment source and as another potential fund source, but it also, hopefully with the creative ways of, the more deliberate ways of making sure that we draw from the local community and the local employment pool, that we keep folks in our town employed. We meet the needs that are specific to us with respect to multifamily housing. It looks like 72% of your portfolio is for multifamily housing, and that's something that we've had a lot of issues with because we have many developers right now, as dirt is cheap in Santa Ana. The easiest way to get return on your investment is to do small units, micro units, and really what we need here are multifamily 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom units for our families that are here. So, just to staff, any thoughts on what's being proposed tonight?
I think what you have here is, we're in the process of an RFP, and you have 13 proposers and 13 potential partners to maximize or to shrink the city's investment if they can maximize their private market investment.
Okay. Well, that we certainly want to do that, but I guess I want to tighten it up a little bit where, people are proposing, but they're proposing the projects that we want to see, right? Because, we have a lot of folks that want to partner with us, work with us, but to the extent that they can address the priorities that we've tried to make clear, I think, over time in the housing element and other, governing documents that tell us our demography requires that profile of development. I guess working with partners that are going to be able to address those and see those as a consistent purpose for them as well is something that I'd like us to consider as we can consider folks here, but anybody who submits and who procures for that partnership.
Well, the next time we go out to RFP, we can certainly bring that RFP to City Council to bless before it is released, to have that extra level of review before it is released. Of the 13 proposals we have now, staff is weeding them down to a number of manageable proposals, and 2 of the top scoring criteria are the level of income it serves. The lower income they serve, the higher their score is, and then the bedroom count. Either it's a 0 through 10 rating. So we'll be able to weed out those ones with the studios and the 1 bedrooms a little bit better than we have previously. So I think our RFP process really helps get you to that point.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think that's where the inconsistency has been. So, working off that, same template, I guess, would be helpful for us. So good. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Great. As we brought up these policies, and it was myself and Councilman Solorio when we were debating on how we would be using our funds, and I'm wanting to thank Judson and other staff members for really bringing that policy together and, really thinking really hard of how we want to utilize our funds. And through that whole time, I was just thinking of how do we leverage, our partners and leverage the opportunities that we have. Because we are not meeting the needs of this community and or building the affordable housing fast enough. And the instability in this community is only going to get greater. And this is going to impact our children and our families. And, that breaks my heart. And I think you all saw me at the last council meeting, very emotional to hear moms and the struggles that they're facing. And so, really want to move this forward because we have an immense opportunity to really leverage all the partnerships and be creative with the gap financing. And this is a perfect opportunity as we're a strong partner with the trades and doing a project labor agreement. And, you know, we already have to comply with a lot of the laws, so it only makes sense to use these kinds of investments. But more importantly, how do we leverage as well the opportunity zones? And next, you know, we're going to be talking about a proposal for tax increment and to not only finance infrastructure projects for long-term sustainability, but also affordable housing. We need more funding than in lieu. That's a very small amount. The amount of housing that we need to build, and it's not like we don't have 20 years, we don't have 10 years, we don't have 5 years. And we're not going to be able to get there if we don't have a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy to get us there. But we have to really connect all the dots. And that's what I'm trying to do here today, is to be creative and to look at this as an option to leverage with the private, developers and nonprofit, because I also believe that our private development community can build on site. They don't have to just partner with the nonprofit community. We all know that it makes the most sense to build on site. You'll get more units faster than having to wait, you know, what we have been having to wait. One example is the development by the Station District. You know, it took about 6 years for the Cottles to get all that funding, right? 6 years. And it's probably one of the best projects that we have seen here in this city, but 6 years from beginning to the end. We don't have time for that. And that's only 86 to 89 units, right? So we have an opportunity here today, one, to figure out how do we leverage this? How do we also move towards wanting to look at this potential proposed tax increment financing so that we have a long-term strategy to actually it really having a true impact on developing the housing that we need, because I'm in agreement with Councilman Sarmiento that, you know, the housing that has been built has really not reflected this community. And certainly understand that we had to build market rate, to level us out. And I think we've done that to a certain extent. And what's in the pipeline is obviously about 6,000 more units of market rate in comparison to the amount of units of affordable housing. And we have to be very cognizant. There are 16 new planning laws coming into play in 2019 that are going to have some major impacts to this community, because we're an old community. We have a 30-year-old outdated general plan and a 60-year-old outdated zoning code. And the new law is saying that now charter cities have to be in compliance with state law, that our general plan and our zoning is going to have to be compatible. So the state is going to come down hard on cities. There's possibly potential decertification, sending us to the Attorney General. So the HC director has been very open and honest, and the potential new governor has also been honest in saying that they're going to hold us accountable. And so these are opportunities that I believe that we can leverage. And so I would just encourage my colleagues for us to bring this to the council and making sure that they are able to utilize this as a resource and a tool and support something like this, so that we can provide more financing and build more units faster than having to wait 5 or 6 years. And so that is my recommendation to this council. I'm not sure, Steve, what direction, if you need it to go to the council, is this a policy decision? So that's the question that I have towards staff. What are the next steps for us to figure out a way to maximize this opportunity?
I think we're going to have to put some heads together and see which policies need to be modified. Which policies do we have that get in the way of this? And I would ask for some time to do that. We would have to take a look and get our housing staff together and the city manager's office and look at some of the things that might be in the way of doing this.
And can we just make sure that we keep Ernesto and Ted involved, because obviously they've done a lot of these projects, and they may have ways to expedite and remove some of these barriers. I think it's going to be very important for us to keep them involved and figure what those next steps are. I've made it very clear to them that myself and Councilman Benavides have 2 more meetings, and we want to do all that we possibly can to provide the tools and the resources to this next council so that we don't have to wait 4, 5, 10 more years to build the housing that our residents need today.
I think what we can do is we can have a follow-up conversation with Ernesto and Ted to see what kind of barriers were removed from other cities that help them move a little faster and get a little more money on the table sooner, and go from there.
Ted, any comments?
I would look forward to following up with the staff on this. And I'd say one of the important things is building in, as you're looking in those RFP responses, how they're addressing the job side of things as well. The council is concerned about the local hire aspects, and looking forward to showing how the barriers have been able to be overcome, and we've been able to minimize the public contribution, which stretches the public resources as well, for in particular the proposals you've received, but also for affordable housing proposed in the city as a whole.
Great. Councilman Benavides?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. A couple of follow-up questions. Is there a minimum to the number of units that is required for the Housing Investment Trust to consider providing funding, or is that completely at the discretion of whoever the applicant is and the trust? Is there a minimum?
We don't have a minimum, but the typical project would have a typical smaller project would have in the magnitude of 50 or 60 units, which is also about what the typical tax credit project may have. We do projects that are many times that size. I think there was a parcel in your RFP that is already zoned for, I believe it's 120 units. It's one very large site. But we don't have a minimum in terms of the number of units or the amount of debt. For apartment building, there's going to be a certain level below which someone's not going to look at this, probably $3 to $5 million. We just locked the loan at $2.5 million, and we've done them as large as 120 million.
So I'm trying to kind of picture a scenario of where, for example, now currently we have RFP went out. There's a certain amount of in lieu dollars that are being applied for the city to contribute. Some of what we might factor in is the cost of the cost per door, if you will, per unit. Like what to try to look at leveraging and leveraging dollars to be able to get the maximum number of housing units available and families served. Ultimately, the applicant is the one who is, the developer is the one who is applying for funds with us, and then they go out to secure other sources of funding. In this case, is the Housing Investment Trust, do you make yourself available as one of those potential funding sources, and does the city encourage folks to go that way and consider you for funding and to secure funding through you? I'm trying to understand the net benefit to overall to the I guess the project itself, and how I think maybe part of answer to my questions what Councilwoman was just mentioning, that it potentially is an expedited. That's, in some cases, there are several rounds of competitive financing that, particularly some of the nonprofit affordable housing developers have looked to secure, and that sometimes takes years to come together. Is that part of the net the benefit or the opportunity that you provide to a development project is to expedite that? Are there other things that maybe I'm not?
Because the use of our financing can stretch the subsidy dollars, can result in less subsidy dollars. Sometimes developers either don't have to use a particular program, they require less in public funds, or they just require fewer sources. To put some numbers on it, if the 120 unit development, let's say if that were $400,000 a door, which I know is it's extraordinary these days, but it's probably what you're seeing in Santa Ana. That's a $48 million development. They could go through a non-competitive tax credit process, and they might yield $7+ million in tax credit. They'd need about $40 million in debt. At that level, the use of ARC financing would save on the magnitude of a little over $1 million. It's basically 2.5% to 3% of the total amount of the debt, which, if it saves the city more than $1 million, is significant.
Right.
If it means one of those sources, and I'm sure you've seen the layer cake of different subsidy sources, from infill infrastructure grant to affordable and sustainable communities. If it means that one fewer of those sources has to be used, let's say an affordable housing program grant from the Home Loan Bank, that can save time and save resources as well. Mm-hmm. But think of the rule of thumb as being about 2.5% to 3% of the debt.
I see. Thank you, and for answering my questions, for bringing this before us, and to the degree that a partnership here could potentially create for good-paying, quality jobs for our community, good housing opportunities for our lower-income families, and an expedited manner by which we can make housing available. I think there's a win-win for sure.
Just with Councilmember Benavides' last point, I think moving forward, some of the policies or rating that we can include is that how do we help expedite by using these alternative creative ways to reduce the affordable capital stacks, right? Because sometimes those capital stacks are fairly long because of the financing mechanisms that they have to go through. So if the city wants to build, an affordable housing in 3 years, what does that look like comparison to 5 years or 6 years? And so if staff can look at ways like that to reduce the capital stack with those other creative ways and trying to get this project up and going faster than usual, because I think what we all have seen in our history is that we have all these projects and we're excited, and then we're like, okay, well, when is this going to get built? And then, they missed the tax credits, or they still have this financing gap, and they come back to the city asking for more money. Like, we're a bank and we're not a bank, right? Mm-hmm. And so, if we have these other alternatives, that helps us, but we have to set those parameters. And I don't think we've been that clear, because I think we've been just wanting to build, but it's taken, quite some time that we just don't have that patience anymore. And so if we have developers that want to be creative and use some of these tools, we should be rating them on that as well, versus wanting to wait the 5-6 years.
Can I ask a quick question? So the sources of funding, it's meant to be a gap financing source. Is the source able to basically cover the entire project and leveraging city fund potentially, and not necessarily needing to have the other capital investment within the project to help create affordable housing? So I guess the simple question is, let's say if we are leveraging funds and the source is money here, can the fund basically provide for the affordable housing component instead of the other layers?
Did you hear that, Ted?
I believe I heard it. We're not the gap financing, we're the debt financing. So if without us, a project may be able to support $40 million of debt, but with us it can support a little more than $41 million from us, because of basically ways we customize the financing to increase the amount of tax credits that a project gets and lower the permanent interest rate that it pays. Then that reduces the amount of the other gap sources that are necessary. But we're not ourselves a gap financing source, other than on the new markets projects, but that doesn't apply to the affordable housing.
So we would capture the difference.
Yeah, I mean, where a developer may be asking for a it may be a $3 million city loan, then it may be a $2 million city loan, or where they've got to go through an application process to the federal home loan banks, affordable housing program. Maybe they don't need that source because they're able to use more funds from us.
Ted, have you been in situations where an affordable project has exclusively used funds from the local municipality, local city, and from the Housing Investment Trust as a lending source, and not necessarily had to go out to secure funding from these other layered sources, or where you have basically funded the whole or financing?
They almost always are using the non-competitive tax credit program. There are two tax credit programs. The one that it can take people years to get through it.
Right.
It's a very large subsidy. We work primarily with developers, affordable housing developers who are going through the 4% non-competitive tax credit process. It comes with tax-exempt bonds and 4% tax credits, not the 9% credit. And that can take a lot less time.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
You know, they don't go through that state scoring from the tax credit allocation committee. They still have to apply to the state through to the debt limit allocation committee, but they don't have to go through the competition at the tax credit committee.
Got it. Thank you. No.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Ted. We greatly appreciate your time, and thank you, Ernesto. We look forward to working with you all, and our staff will definitely stay in contact with you all to give us some next steps.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the council.
Fantastic. We're now moving on to item 3, the tax increment. I'm going to call on Kimberly Clark from SCAG. And here is just another opportunity that I wanted to bring towards the council, as we've actually been working on this in about a year with SCAG and Cosmon as a pilot, and wanting to really just propose a potential tax increment financing study area to see how we can value capture, to bring revenue in for infrastructure that we definitely need, and number 2, the potential to create a fund for affordable housing that would help us leverage the current funds that we have and other potential opportunities like the opportunity zones. And with that, I'll let you take it away, Kimberly.
Great. Thanks very much, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Clark. I'm a regional planner with SCAG. I'm here with our consultant, Joe Diegas from Cosmon Companies. We're going to be talking a little bit about community revitalization investment authorities. Yes. As well as enhanced infrastructure financing districts. We've been hearing a lot about the tools that local jurisdictions have for constructing affordable housing. And what we have heard from several jurisdictions is that after the loss of redevelopment, the tax increment financing tools have been difficult to establish and to make real in local jurisdictions. So SCAG has been conducting a number of pilots throughout the region, and we've been targeting areas that have regional significance. And so we've chosen the city of Santa Ana to do a pilot study to see what could be the potential return from an enhanced infrastructure financing district, or CREA, EIFD or CREA. And we'll go ahead and go into that presentation. So in reviewing projects, we use the following criteria to determine a potential eligibility, starting with if a project area had a high potential for development and redevelopment within the next 5 to 10 years. Also, if a project area supports mixed use and transit-oriented development, has transportation and related infrastructure that can be catalytic for future development, has infrastructure, provides for community-wide and regional benefit, and then, of course, potential funding capacity from property tax increment and complementary sources. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Joseph Diegas from Cosmon Companies.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council or the subcommittee. So what we're trying to do tonight is just give an overview, or what might be more appropriately for a lot of the folks here, just a refresher or an update since last year, or whenever it was that we were here last. As has been commented earlier tonight, we've seen several changes come out since dissolution of redevelopment agencies in 2012. Really started in 2014 when EIFDs were first introduced, and over the last 4 years or so, we've seen CREAs be introduced in 2015, changes to both EIFDs and CREAs over the years, large series of tax increment and housing-related bills last September in 2017. And since then, later in 2017 and earlier this year, we've seen further revisions and new tools be introduced as recently as September last month. And some of those changes include enhancing the existing tools in EIFDs, enhancing CREAs, and introducing a new tax increment financing tools called Affordable Housing Authorities, AHAs, as we've dubbed them. And AHAs have already been amended with this last AB 2035, the last item here. So what we try to do is bracket all of these new tools so we have a better sense of what they offer. On the left-hand side of this page 4 are the tax increment financing tools. This will largely be the focus of today's discussion. CREAs, EIFDs, and AHAs. All of these are similar in that they are tax increment financing mechanisms that capture increases in assessed value, either from new development or redevelopment of existing property, and allow for the expenditure of those funds for a certain set of eligible uses. And we'll talk about some of those differences in eligible uses between the various alternatives. On the right-hand column, really just for reference, are some of the other types of districts that are not tax increment in nature, but really just designed to streamline the CEQA and permitting process. A lot of that was introduced in late 2017. We'd like to give a bit more of an in-depth overview of EIFDs and some of these others. EIFDs, Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts, based on previously existing IFD law, Infrastructure Financing District laws. They, again, enable tax increment financing with a significant emphasis on infrastructure. The district lifetime is 45 years, and that clock really starts ticking after tax increment is issued. Tax increment bonds are issued. The definition of eligible uses is quite broad. We'll give some examples in a moment, but it's a large list of items preceding, or the words preceding are any property with a useful life of 15 plus years and of community-wide significance, and then they say including but not limited to, and list a whole bunch of examples that we'll get into. But infrastructure, very broadly defined. The entity that governs the EIFDs is a separate entity called the Public Financing Authority, and the membership of that board is comprised of either the city council or county board or the governing members of those entities that are contributing property tax. So if Santa Ana went forward with an EIFD, just alone with the city of Santa Ana, that membership would be minimally 5 members, including 3 city council members and 2 members of the public appointed. The activities of that PFA, of the EIFD, are governed by a plan. It's called the Infrastructure Financing Plan. And we think of it like a combination of the old RDA implementation plans and today's capital improvement programs. It's a business plan. Outlines where the money's coming from and how it's going to be spent, to state it simply. There is no public vote to create an EIFD. So to create the district, there's no public vote. However, if there is an issuance of tax increment bonds from the EIFD, there is a 55% vote, either by landowners or registered voters, depending on how you draw your boundary. So if you draw a boundary like the one we've preliminarily drawn today, that inevitably has more than 12 registered voters in it, that vote would be by the registered voters. If it were somehow less than 12 registered voters, it would be a vote of landowners, prorated by acreage. Dissimilar from RDA, from redevelopment agencies, school districts cannot contribute increment even if they wanted to. It's similar among all the new tax increment financing tools. And the last point here is that this is not an increase in property tax to the property owner. It's not like a community facilities district or a business improvement district where there's an additional assessment on the property owner's bill. This is tax increment in that it's the entities that receive the property tax, cities, counties, special districts, that are making an election to dedicate some portion of that incremental future property tax growth to a special purpose entity with a target like infrastructure, affordable housing, and some of the other things we'll talk about. CREA, Community Revitalization and Investment Authorities. This is based on portions of former redevelopment law. So again, EIFD was based on IFD law, Infrastructure Financing District law. This is a bit different. It's based on certain portions of former redevelopment law. A lot of similarities with EIFD. It's a tax increment funding mechanism. The governing board is similar in terms of it's likely a combination of those entities that are contributing increment. So it's city council members, county board members if the county is contributing increment, and also at least two members of the public, similar to EIFD. The CREA enables the power of eminent domain for the first 12 years of the district's lifetime. Similar to EIFD, there's no voter approval for formation, but different from EIFDs, there's also no voter approval required for bond issuance. The one caveat we want to make as it relates to formation is that there is a majority protest opportunity at formation in case a large portion of the electorate wants to either halt proceedings or make a revision to the planned operations of the district. Also different, very importantly different from EIFDs, is that there's a requirement that 25% of tax increment funds generated are set aside for affordable housing uses. So we'll talk about this some more, but EIFDs can spend money on affordable housing. CREAs can, and they're further required to do so. 25% of tax increment funds, again, are required to be set aside for affordable housing uses. Also differently from EIFD, you have to qualify to use CREA. You have to qualify, you have some options for how you qualify. Generally speaking, it's based on income, crime, unemployment, or other demographic and economic indicators, or if Cal EPA designates your census tracts as disadvantaged community census tracts.
Before you continue, Madam Chair, if I can ask a couple of questions, just so that I can make sure that I'm following quite a few acronyms or different terms that are new to me. Frankly, I know our Mayor Pro Tem has been involved with SCAG in a number of these different discussions in the past. So it's very intriguing. What I'm most familiar, it seems like somewhat similar to RDAs or the RDA when we had them, and the tax increment. They're a portion of the taxes, property taxes, and going back to the way the RDA worked, was captured, and rather than being sent back up to states, being made available for basically reinvestment in a variety of different sources, typically economic development, housing.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, is this similar? And the tax increment, does it come from the stipulated tax, property tax that's already in place for the properties within this potential district or area, or is it in addition to, and at what rate, if it is in addition to? Just sort of, just want to see if I'm following and understanding correctly that it's similar to the whole RDA process.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Councilmember. So it's future new incremental property tax. So anything that flows today to the city or to the county or to the other special districts, it's not pledgeable, it's not available to the district. What is available is only all or a portion of future incremental property tax as assessed value grows beyond today's baseline. And within that, it is quite flexible as far as how much of that you contribute, if you contribute it to one of these districts, and it can change over time. There can be some sort of sliding scale, or the districts are authorized up to 45 plus years, but in many of the cases we're evaluating, including the pilots with SCAG, it's only a portion, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, that any of the entities are actually contributing the increment. So it's quite flexible, and it can change over time. You can dedicate only a portion of it. You could increase it over time. You could decrease it and phase it out completely over time. There's a lot of flexibility there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So the things you could spend the money on, for both EIFDs and CREAs, the focus is infrastructure and affordable housing. All types of infrastructure are included. It's very, very broadly defined. It's a very long list that starts with the words.
So, like a third grader, I just wanted to state a point. So, just because I know it, but just so that others. So, for example, the current new projects, who's capturing that value right now? Can you like in this city? So, who's capturing that that increment right now?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. So, the largest property tax receivers are. School entities receive a large portion of it, the city of Santa Ana, the county of Orange, and they are sort of districts like the county sanitation receives portions within the city, the county flood
control
may.
pan, the San Clemente beaches and harbors. And so all these folks are capturing that when we have the potential. And this is the tool that we possibly can gather ourselves to have versus, those other entities. Obviously, we're not going to be able to take from the school districts, but, a lot of folks don't understand that there's a 60-40 split as it pertains to just property tax in general. 60% goes to education, 40% goes to municipalities. And as we all know, prior to Prop 13, we've lost about 30% of our revenue. And so to be a full service city today and with the loss of redevelopment, there is no way that we can continue on the path that we're on and sustain ourselves long term, or we're going to have to remove from being a full service city, which means then less revenue comes to this entity. And I think we always try to compare ourselves cities to cities, but we're not equal. And we're not equal because, for example, here in Orange County, most South County cities are contract cities, so they don't receive the property tax at the levels that we receive, like Santa Ana, Fullerton, and Anaheim, because one, we're an older city, and number two, we're full service cities. So we get the benefit and we generate more property tax. And so I think as we move forward and we're looking at all these tax increments and who's benefiting, that's why I talked about the incremental revenue earlier, because it's important. We had redevelopment, and there's going to be a sunset. And this is another opportunity for us to capture that, but do it in a strategic manner to meet the needs of this city. One is infrastructure, and two is housing. This is a perfect opportunity for us, is what I wanted to highlight.
Thank you. So you said it. So infrastructure and housing are the focus. Infrastructure is very broadly defined. And to reiterate, both EIFDs and CREAs can spend money on infrastructure, on affordable housing. But again, CREAs are required to do so with at least 25% affordable housing set aside. So beyond just infrastructure and housing, just want to point out some of these, brownfield remediation, even childcare facilities, parks and open space, those types of things are included. There's been some preliminary discussion about things like grade separation, keeping kids away from cars. That's absolutely eligible in both of these types of districts. So why are our agencies authorizing districts? We see a lot of reasons. No two EIFDs or CREAs are the same, but a lot of the time we're seeing it as a tool to implement housing and climate action plans at the local level. There's a big difference in number two, this idea that when you've committed revenue streams in a separate entity with a purpose, an EIFD or a CREA with a stated purpose of infrastructure and housing, that's a very different message to the development community in the private sector if there's a committed entity with a dedicated revenue stream versus perhaps just a line item in the city's budget, in the general fund budget, that says you're going to invest a certain amount of dollars in infrastructure or affordable housing. The private sector, those entities who've done work with municipalities in the past, they clearly understand the difference and the certainty of certain revenue streams is of paramount importance to developers. In number three, we wouldn't recommend, certainly in our SCAG pilots or otherwise, to any community to consider one of these districts if it didn't make sense on a dollar-for-dollar basis. So all of these analyses include what we call fiscal impact analysis from a net fiscal impact basis. We talk a lot about benefits in terms of housing and job creation and even greenhouse gas reduction, vehicle miles traveled reduction. But we always focus in large part on fiscal general fund solvency. We want to make sure that if a city is going to invest a certain amount of dollars over a certain amount of time period, that it makes sense from a net fiscal benefit, net of the dollars contributed to the EIFD, and net of the cost to operate the city in terms of police, fire, community services, et cetera, that the return on the city's investment with one of these districts will make sense over the district's lifetime and beyond. So it's an important point, number three. Number four, I just want to say what we continually see is that these tools continue to get better with each legislative session. And we think that's because the state has set some ambitious goals about things like GHG reduction and vehicle miles traveled reduction. And it's only through improving the tools that it can actually achieve those. Number five, these tools are flexible in their ability to bundle other revenues, whether they're grant sources or other types of sources, their flexibility in being able to act as sort of a bundling tool or a funnel for various revenue streams, it's attractive to many of our communities. Number 6, beyond that, what we're seeing is that grant sources at the state level in particular are placing additional priority on these entities versus just your standard city or county application for grant funds. Again, similar to the private sector, it's a very clear message. This is a special purpose entity with a focus on infrastructure and housing, and that is more attractive to our grant providers. Number 7 we talked about is they're not new taxes to the property owner. It's an important consideration. And the last one, no voter approval for formation, and for the CREA case for bond formation, it's a more streamlined process. But I will say that there's a lot of transparency and ability for the community to weigh in via a series of mandated public hearings for both EI, FDs, and CREAs. So just to give you a sense, these districts are either being evaluated or already in process of formation across the state. I think it's been 3 that have been formed so far in West Sacramento, Laverne in Los Angeles County, and San Diego, Otay Mesa. But as you can see, they're in various stages of evaluation and formation all across the state.
3 total currently throughout the state have been approved?
Correct, and fully formed. Some of the most promising ones, in addition to those 3, by the way, involve SCAG. Some here in Orange County, City of Placentia, another SCAG pilot project. What we have on this page 10 is this is a preliminary draft proposed study area. This is a start for what we want to evaluate in Santa Ana. It's been provided as a separate handout, and I'll go through some of the bullets from our perspective at a high level about why this preliminary boundary was drawn, but I'll certainly open it up if Mr. Mendoza or other members of staff would like to weigh in further. But we're including the Civic Center, surrounding neighborhoods that include a mix of single and multifamily residential, low-income population areas, and those disadvantaged community census tracts we discussed briefly earlier. SARDC, Santa Ana Regional Transportation Center, the zoo, the former OC Register site. It includes portions of the future OC streetcar alignment, Midtown specific plan. This last point is important, though. I mean, we're not by any means of kicking off the SCAG-funded initiative of starting the evaluation. We're by no means marrying ourselves to these boundaries. It's in all the cases of all the SCAG pilot projects and other evaluations that Cosmont works on. Typically, as we learn more along the way and we start to see numbers about things like funding capacity and honing in on what we'd like to spend the money on, we modify those boundaries along the way. I'll pause there for a second. Is there any additional comment that folks want to make as far as considerations or questions?
Yeah,
on
one
the
of the initial discussions we had last week, I followed up that we were interested in having the other grade separation on 17th between Grand and the 5 freeway entered. So we wanted to square it off up at the top, but we can work on the technicalities later. We wanted to make sure both grade separations were within this district.
Thank you. That's just an example of that sort of modification.
So you can see the line, this is the study area line that goes here and here, and then the crosshatch is the opportunity zones. We wanted to layer this and see what it looked like with the opportunity zones, so we really are able to capture a lot of the opportunity zones.
And again, just leveraging our opportunity to maximize as much as we possibly can. And so I just want to thank Mr. Mendoza and Min, and of course our SCAG staff in Cosmont. We do have some next steps, so I don't know if there's any questions. Some of the next steps, and again, the city is not paying for this. This is a pilot that SCAG is partnered up with Cosmont. So what we're asking for today is to really authorize SCAG and Cosmont to initiate a pilot project feasibility analysis, and then move forward with SCAG and Cosmont to prepare and present initial findings to the city. And then based on the findings, initiate stakeholder outreach, city council, county, board, and refine assumptions, boundaries, proposed development, targeted infrastructure, and housing expenditures, financial partners, and amount of increment dedicated as appropriate. and then initiate the district formation of activities. So those are the next steps that I am asking my colleagues to look at, and then move forward to the city council to move forward to initiate this pilot project.
Thank you. So we'd love to entertain questions.
Just a comment, question. One is it seems like just a great tool and opportunity for definitely for Santa Ana and these other cities and areas that you pointed out, especially in light of the doing away with the RDAs a couple years ago, which was the tool that we were using at that point, made available to cities. I'm curious, the area, do we have any idea yet what type of dollar figure amount would potentially be captured in like projections in years, or is it too preliminary to have that sense, and what type of projects would be?
I wish I did. I don't.
Yeah.
Perhaps finance has a better perspective, but that's something we could honestly come back with pretty quickly, just to give an initial sense.
Yeah.
But I don't have that prepared now.
No, it definitely makes sense. Mayor Pro Tem, thanks for bringing this forward.
Yep, great.
If it needs to emotion, I'll move.
Great. Comment, Steve?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Martinez for matching us up with this group to make sure this is implemented. We always love using other people's money, so thank you, SCAG. And I do mean that with the bottom of my heart. Using SCAG's money to hire a consultant streamlines the process from the get-go. We really appreciate this. So we're in a hurry to get this to the full city council so they can ratify the map, move it forward, and get them started.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Thank you all so very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
your guys' work.
And it's beyond your money, your talent, expertise, and bringing all of that to the city, so that at the end of the day, our community and our residents benefit. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
All right. So great. We're now moving to Citywide Economic Assessment. Candida, Min is not here. Are you taking this one? I am. Okay, and then followed by your
Good evening, Council Subcommittee. Today we're going to be pulling up the PowerPoint presentation, but hopefully you all have copies of it as well. Thank you. And this, we're bringing this back to you in response to a request when we expanded the MIMU to discuss ways of looking at economic assessments and to make sure that as we proceed forward, the MIMU would be implemented or acted upon in a way that was consistent with the values of the plan. And when we were looking at it, and particularly economics was a big issue, but when we were looking at it, we also realized that there were things that we wanted to approach citywide as well. So we are going to go on. So we developed, there's two components to this. The first component is the economic assessment framework, and the second part will be the design policy implementation program. The economic assessment framework will be addressed citywide for some portions of it. And this slide here explains the 4 levels that we are talking about looking at. And we'll go through each of them individually. But the first one is the lowest level. It's our economic worksheet. The second is more intense. It applies to any time we change a land use. And the third one is a mixed use feasibility analysis. And then the fourth one is specific to MIMU, and that's talking about development capacity analysis. The first one is purely data collection. The middle two are project analysis. And then the fourth one is evaluating the effectiveness of the MIMU. So if we go to the next page, This is the the baseline economic worksheet. We're going to be collecting this on everything that goes through our internal site plan review process. So that the trigger for that will be a project that's 2,500 square feet or more. At that, we will be, and the goal of this is to be collecting pertinent economic information so that we can better look at economic trends and respond to it with appropriate policy making. So the things that we're going to be asking applicants to provide us are property tax valuation, and all of this information, I'm going to have to highlight it, all of it will be existing with the proposed land use change, and then whatever net increment. I need to identify the net increment as well. So we're looking at property tax evaluation, annual sales tax revenues, jobs, and then permit fees and development impact fees. So that would be, this is for, again, this is for by right projects. So anything that's larger than 2,500 square feet.
So just at the bottom of that economic worksheet, you might want to look at Roman numeral number 2. It says, does your project active an overlay? So you might want to wordsmith that.
Activate.
Activate might be a little bit more grammatically correct.
I also have a follow-up question. So I think a lot of what is triggered, and I appreciate your bringing this forward and this follow-up for this committee to discuss. This is where members of the committee have been trying to look at through looking at projects and looking at things and approvals and considerations by the city with a keen eye specifically in the area of economic development. However, one of the key areas or that's triggered is some of these larger projects, these multi, large 100+ units, 3, 4, 5 stories that are going to bring a lot of impact. Yet we haven't necessarily been analyzing, looking at the level both of impact and specifically the economic benefit or that will bring or project to bring to the city. The 2,500 square foot requirement, I'm wondering whether that's a bit, I'm thinking that could be somewhat of a small shop, it could be, I'm wondering whether it can be for, let's say, a startup, either whether it's a restaurant or a store or something of that sort, whether this might be a bit of a challenge for somebody that's not necessarily as sophisticated to complete and do this research, whether we might want to increase the square footage when it's triggered, when it's required, or is there a rationale, or would there be any type of assistance or resources or either consultants for folks who are going to be directed toward, and what's the cost maybe that they might have to incur? And again, I'm thinking more in mind. My question concern is that smaller, or smaller.
Most of this
operator.
Information they should be able to pull up. We gave them resources to do, as you'll see, the blue, the things that are in the application and blue. Oh, let me go back to the previous one. Those footnotes that are in blue provide resources for small developments. And again, this is purely a mechanism for collecting data. We're not going to be conditioning these projects. These are by right projects, but we do want to know how many square footage, what kind of new jobs. We want to be able to at least get some baseline information that's happening annually every year from all of our projects. So that was the goal. So again, these are projects that have to go through our site plan review process. The next level of economic analysis is the baseline economic analysis. This is for projects where the land use is changing, such as a general plan amendment, a zone change, if they were going to activate an overlay in the MIMU or the transit zoning code. So anytime you're having an actual change in land use, and this project would be, this analysis itself would be prepared by a professional, and the applicant that's applying for that change, that land use change, would have to pay for the consultant to prepare that study, and it would be done under city contract. What we would be asking them to look at is just kind of a project overview. They'd look at the base information that's provided in the in that base level economic analysis worksheet that we first looked at, and then they'd project development fees, and then this slide is wrong. It isn't recurring fees that we're talking about, but recurring revenue. So annual revenues that will be coming in every year to the general fund from this project, as well as recurring expenditures. So the types of things that the city would be responsible for paying in terms of services that we would be subsidizing for them. And then job creation loss. And then they'd be having to do a summary, sort of a summarize in a cost benefit analysis what the net impacts of this project would be, this proposed land use change would be.
And again, so this would also be the 25. What's
this is
triggers
over,
this one?
This triggers if they're going
Or
after a zone change, a general plan amendment, or if you're activating a mixed use, one of our overlays. So that would be if you were going to activate the mixed use level in the MIMU or the transit zoning code.
Any idea what the cost of doing this type of analysis would be? Do we have? I imagine it might not be something that we've been looked into or have had a need to look into. But
it would depend on the size of the project.
Okay.
So a small project would probably be 15,000. A very large project could be 50. You know, I mean, if they were rezoning a large portion of the city.
Okay.
The next level that we talked about, that we looked at, is specific to the MIMU. And one of the things that we've had some problems with is when the developers come in, they say, well, commercial just doesn't pencil out, we can't do commercial. And in this analysis, we're asking the developers to give us their homework. So for if someone is coming into the MIMU and they're developing a mixed-use project and they're proposing a certain proportion of residential to commercial, we're asking them to tell us what the net figures are on that, on that analysis. And what you see on the right is a table that was prepared for the city of Azusa on their transit-oriented development areas. And it's what they call a market demand forecast. And it lays out some parameters for if you have this much multifamily, it can support up to this much retail and this much office or commercial. So it sets some parameters for us. And what we're proposing to do is, as part of the general plan update economic study, include in there a market demand forecast so that we could have that base data in looking forward to new projects throughout this, and then evaluate them. Be able to, again, the developer would have to provide, remember the previous study, because they're changing the land use, they're activating the MIMU land use. So they would have to meet this standard. And that would apply to any mixed-use project, anytime it'd be a mixed-use project.
So what's the ratio? How is that arrived at? Or is that an analysis?
That will be part of the general plan market feasibility analysis. What did we call it? I'm sorry. market demand forecast. So that'll be part of that market demand forecast. Thank you very much. That we'll be doing.
I was thinking, Anita, let her choke, let her choke.
Let me choke. Just give her some eyes, huh? Thank you, Michelle. Always my fan.
I'm your biggest fan.
Anyway, no, it'll be part. We can work it into the general plan economic analysis portion of the general plan. So we're gonna modify that portion of our economic to include that kind of study.
So that's where I'm a little confused. So on the general plan, so the areas, let's say the overlay zone areas versus areas where there's conversions from one use to another, wherever these triggers, wherever this analysis would be triggered, is there like a general adopted ratio based upon the general plan amendments, or is there something that's done almost like site by site?
There's going to be. It's our understanding that they're going to be looking at specific areas because we only allow mixed use. This is only for mixed use projects because remember that the idea is that we're uncomfortable. There's some negotiating room between how much residential and how much commercial will be in a mixed use project. And usually the developer wants what's ever going to be the most beneficial to them. And what we want is what's going to be most beneficial to us in the long run. So to be able to figure out those numbers of what is what, we're asking to prepare this economic analysis for all those areas that we allow mixed use. And so we're going to be looking at it for all those focus areas that we're focusing on in the general plan update, and then as well as the areas that we allow mixed use, which are the MIMU area and the transit zoning code.
Right, and that's what I guess that's what I was getting at, is that those two districts are very distinct, right?
Yes.
I think that some would say, a developer would say, the transit zoning area, the transit district is maybe more, there's more density, there's a higher propensity for retail to be successful versus where the MIMU is.
Yes.
There's a lot less density.
They'll be looking at them specific to those areas.
So there won't be one governing ratio.
No. As they did in the Azusa plan, they looked at it citywide, and then they looked at two specific areas, downtown and another commercial area, the Citrus Station area. So that's what they did. So we're expecting that they will be looking at various areas. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Yes. And then the last component of it is something that's actually required by the MIMU is we are required to do a development capacity report. And when we look at projects within the MIMU, we have to say whether or not we're exceeding the capacity of the MIMU overlay. And right now, we're well within those capacities. We're at 34% of the residential and only 4% of the retail, and we haven't even touched our office square footage. But as new projects come in, we will be looking at them and seeing where we are within that cap for implementation. The final thing that you asked us to do was to look at these overarching design principles of the MIMU to make sure that the design goals and policies were being implemented. And they were integrating new development, urban village character, retail variety, as well as pedestrian system and planning to stimulate investment. And what we did was we took these overarching policies and we incorporated them into a implementation worksheet. So as part of their application, individual project proponents, applicants are going to have to fill out this sheet that tells us what they are doing to implement this plan and what their community benefits are going to be. So, and that will be analyzed as part of the evaluation of the project. So that concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them now.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, just one comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this is an economic worksheet, and it's supposed to quantify the benefits and maybe the detriments, right, to the introduction of a new project into an area. But I guess I'm trying to see where we can fit in sort of the non-quantifiable, which also, I guess, has some impact. The configuration of the development, how consistent it is with governing documents like the housing element. Would that be part of a sub-element of the community benefits, or would it be like a standalone question? Because I think that question is often asked by policymakers, and it's a question that's really difficult to ask at the tail end of a cycle, right? When somebody has already drafted and they've done renderings and they've already tried to make things pencil out, and then you ask them, well, can you make more bedrooms? And that's a question that should be a front-loaded question to ask them, what's your unit mix? And that way they can anticipate that question is going to be asked of them at some time during the process. But it really is difficult to ask it at the tail end because it's already almost a finished product, and then you're asking somebody to adjust, which is unfair to the applicant. But yet we need to ask that question because it is something that is governed by one of our documents, which is the housing element. So is there any thoughts on where we can maybe include that? Does it fit into this framework?
In the basic economic baseline economics sheet, we do ask them for community benefits for their project, and that might be a good place to ask also for housing. If it's residential, please describe your housing mix and how that's consistent with the housing element. That would be good.
I hope that makes sense, but I know that staff has heard that question enough, I think, from the council that we need to embed it somewhere on the front end for the applicants, just so they're not surprised when we ask that question of them when they're asking for financing and they've already done all their workup. So thanks.
Follow-up question. Thanks again for trying to implement the intent and interest and discussion that we had as we were going through the conversation around the MIMU expansion recently. I think part of the hesitation I know I was having when we were looking at considering the approval is that the MIMU, when we went through the process of designing it, really was intended to capture and maximize opportunity that we saw within that east area of the city. It's freeway close, main thoroughfare into the city along First Street. Just a number of different factors that seem to make it prime for that urban village, mixed use, active community, and to again capitalize on that opportunity. Hasn't necessarily completely come to fruition. However, the potential still lies there. Yet, as we see some of the projects that are proposed, they really seem to be more focused on their specific project, and kind of to the degree this is where that developer sees that they can maximize a return on their investment, and they seem to be looking at the minimum threshold of what they can absorb within their project to try to do a little bit of retail, do majority housing and such. And I know through this, as I'm looking at the MIMU Supplemental Design Policy Implementation Worksheet, it seems to be working on trying to trigger the applicant to think through what their what's in the area, what's their contribution, and how to the broader area. How will this form be used? Is there anything else that we can do to essentially make a good document, the memo, make it even better, even more clear and effective to be able to capture the vision of the council from when we were establishing that overlay zone to the current feedback that's been received? Or is this going to be something where they'll spend a little bit of time, complete it, submit it, and it'll just be attached to the application and it'll be business as usual, I guess, is my question. How do we actually get folks to, how can we, what tools might we be able to use to be able to take what the spirit of this worksheet and bring it to a place to make projects better and again more interact and truly bring benefit to that community long term?
If these goals really do reflect your values, this is the message that we're going to be promoting with developers. So when they come in, they say, how does it integrate? And they say it doesn't, then
Okay.
we're going to say you have to redesign it because it has to. These are things that they have to, that they are being and I think one thing that we got from the council was that there was a frustration that people were hearing it too late in the line. So right now they're hearing it first off before they submit an application. They're going to have to think about these things and put them in their design. And through our process in which we work with the developer we're going to be saying, well, you said that you were doing this, but that's not what is happening here, and this is what the council wants. So
there is an actual staff will actually take this information, sit down with the applicant, walk through their responses, and provide feedback and ensure that their project actually aligns with this broader vision. It's not just a submit this worksheet, check off the box, you're done, and it move on and doesn't get looked at.
No, we intend to use this as our project, as part of our application review process.
Okay.
And so when projects come in with applications, they're sent out to all of the different divisions, and then we compile each of the different divisions and agencies within the city, respond to the application and say, it doesn't meet our streetlight standard, or it doesn't meet our requirement for integrating with the rest of the community. So planning would talk about these questions in their review of the project, whereas just like Public Works would talk about a streetlight being needed.
So thank you. That's helpful. Just to know that'll be part of the project, that design review. Last comment I have here is the retail has been what's been lacking. It's been from the applicants thus far and somewhat of an afterthought. They've included it because they've had to, but it's been very minimal, not much thought into it. So having a retail plan, if we're going to go through the last one, several hundred units that were approved, when the question was presented to the applicant, what's the vision, the plan, the idea of what retail is going to be offered, how it's going to integrate with the surrounding community, there was no answer. It was, well, we'll see down the road what happens. It really was the answer. So can we ensure that there is some type of thought initially, and that there is even a plan that is presented? And again, it could be triggered by a certain threshold or somehow incentivized so that it's not just the housing retailer or housing developers that are looking at this area and again getting a return on their on housing exclusively, but that we're intentionally drawing as a staff, even marketing that area, drawing the interest of retailers. But that was my last comment. Thank you again.
I'm going to provide my comments in writing to you all, so I'll be sending them. Thank you. Great job, Candida.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. Next, we have the last two items is the food truck island permit process and the housing opportunity. I'm going to pass this to Councilman Benavides.
Thank you, Member Tim. We've had some discussions at both here at the council on different, how we are permitting, or at this point don't necessarily have a process for which, food trucks, particularly some of the basically prepared food trucks, how they can apply or permit or be considered. The irony right now is it seems to be more difficult to have a food truck on a private property where there might be even an agreed upon relationship between the property owner and the food truck over somebody setting up on a public street, public right-of-way. So now I would think that ideally it would be the opposite. You would want to be in a place where there's a parking lot, where there's an agreement between the folks rather than in front of somebody's house or something of that nature. But we don't quite have that at this point, but I believe staff has maybe done some research. So at this point, I'll ask Mr. Nunez, our core enforcement manager, to.
So, just to clarify, we do allow food vending on private property via the land use certificate process. However, that's only a temporary approval. So based on the current zoning requirements, a land use certificate can be obtained 6 times a year. Saturday and Sunday counts as 1. So that's not essentially what is being proposed or looked at from the mobile vending or from direction from the city council. So we are looking to more or less implement a pilot program. I think we're, I would say, almost 80% there as far as instituting some type of food truck island permit, right, or food pods, so we can have those type of agreements or permit process to allow folks to set up on private property and or even perhaps even city-owned property, right? The one that always comes to mind, and I say that because that was part of the discussion that we had, as an example, would be a property for like where you have, let's say, a business like a car wash, right? Which has very specific hours of operation, whether it be from 7 to 5 during the winter time, and in the summer 7 to 8, and at times they might have a private contract with a vendor for to allow them to operate after hours, which is one of the proposals that we received at one point that the current zoning did not allow. So for us, would be to allow and permit something like that, we have to expand and establish a permit process, and then look at how we can regulate those type of permitted uses, right? Hours of operation, distance requirements for mother-approved businesses, possible impact on residential areas, possible impact on brick-and-mortar restaurants with the same type of concerns, distance requirements, and not to mention, of course, simple maintenance, property maintenance issues, trash and debris, and things of that item. So we've done, I think, the research in essence. It's a matter of now getting to the fine print and establishing some type of requirement or process so we can bring before the city council to establish and for consideration.
It's just timeline to be able to have something for council. Is that, do you have an idea?
Dropping the gauntlet. I think, and I've checked with the city manager's office and city attorney's office, we could possibly have something within maybe 30 days, if not sooner. Okay. We are working through the city manager's office and the city attorney's office. We have quite a few items, but the idea would be, again, just to clarify, a pilot program to try to weed out those kind of concerns and see we have something that's very palatable for the community. Again, trying to balance the food vendor concerns with our private property, residential, neighborhood concerns. So that's going to be part of our key objectives.
You're a smart guy. Figure it out. We go out to I think a few of us have mentioned, go out to other cities, other communities, right. And there's just this thriving environment. There's this urban nature of just this unique urban experience, right? And food and ambiente, a good environment that Santa Ana is rich of in abundance, if you will, if we figure out a way to be able to allow it to happen. So I appreciate you doing some of that research. giving us an update. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything else. The main thing is I just wanted to bring it up. Sometimes we don't bring something up
Yes, I understand.
amongst all of the other priorities. It gets lost and it's not seen
Understood.
again.
I think,
so.
look, if I was to venture out, I would say we're 80% there.
80%.
Yeah.
You're getting our hopes up. I thought you were going to go for a lower percent. So Alvaro, I think what Councilman Benavides said is true. And what you're saying, when it's a pilot, it's a pilot. You can use some discretionary, tools at your disposal to be very circumspect about where you want to be. Make sure you don't put anything in a sensitive area, and especially when it is pilot, you can be, I think, a little bit more rigid.
Yes.
On your approvals, and that way you get a sense. But just something that I was talking to Mayor Pro Tem about that always confuses me when we're talking about mobile vending versus produce trucks and the regulations that we have on both. I don't know if they're distinct. Food, like this would be for lunch trucks, right?
Right.
Food preparing.
Right.
And then we have mobile vending, where they have they're selling products of some kind, right? Sort of a, like a grocery truck. And we have distances, I think, from parks and schools, and many of those are safety-based. But some of those, I think, for many of us, were like keeping those distances from schools because some of the products that they sell are not healthy, right? And so we want to protect children and families from some, a lot of soda, a lot of candy, a lot of things that may not be healthy. And I was talking to Claire Brayburn, who works with America on Track, and she was making an interesting proposal, and I think she may have spoken to you about introducing, not as a mandate, but as a way to provide a diversity of inventory of products, not just candies and everything, but maybe fruit, vegetables, healthy alternatives. And if you have those vendors that do that, maybe relaxing some of the distance requirements. So I think I had mentioned it to the city manager. I'm not sure. But I think it's something for us to consider. Different than the mobile, lunch trucks, the vendors that are going to be, their sensitivity is different with respect to brick and mortar being right adjacent to them or whatever. But for the produce trucks, some of them do provide a very important service. We don't have a lot of large supermarkets for some of our neighborhoods, and some of our folks don't drive and they walk. So to the extent that we look at that, about maybe seeing that on a sliding scale, the more they step up to provide healthy alternatives, the more flexibility or relaxation we can provide to them with distances on those, so long as, obviously safety isn't compromised. But something to think about. I thought it was an interesting concept. And I know she was telling me what other cities have done that, but I know that she has some of the data.
So I know they reached out to the city manager's office, and we'll probably coordinate a meeting and then look at the other cities, see how they're doing it. Again, the idea is to expedite.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Alrighty.
No comments.
All right.
She's in a rush. That's
Yeah, I have to be at Chapman University to speak. Yeah.
Do you want me to touch on the last item now?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. The Housing Opportunity Ordinance, just wanted to clarify, I think what I understood from previous conversation, right now it's been a tool that has been helpful when we've amended our either general plan, a certain zoning with general plan being updated. Essentially, this tool that we have available to us that is helping us with our intent, the council's intent of increasing our affordable housing stock. Essentially, this tool goes away. I want to clarify that in fact was if that in fact is the case, and if there's been any thought to updating to ensure that the intent of the council to have either in lieu funds, but mainly just the overall idea of having affordable units available at that we'll be able to figure out a way to continue that.
The ordinance itself requires us to bring it back to both the Planning Commission and you before the 31st of this year. So we've scheduled to bring it forward to the Planning Commission in November and then to the City Council in December for an update and further direction on possible revisions or updates to it.
Okay. What I would like to do, I know we're short on time here. We started having the conversation at the last council meeting. At least 3 of us were interested in bringing this, just the idea, the concept about accessible housing, having some discussion, some further discussion at our special meeting that's scheduled for next week. My recommendation to my colleagues that we can call a concurrent special meeting to allow for any of our colleagues to discuss and understand a little bit more about the Housing Opportunity Ordinance and other ideas, tools that we might be able to, that we might want to consider for, again, to support housing accessibility, affordable housing within the city. We had an extensive amount of feedback and input from residents last meeting. Alternatively, we can look to schedule on the following meeting at the end of next month, but we would have an opportunity to be able to have some discussion next week if we would choose to do that. So I don't know if there's 4 of us, either the mayor who would not be interested in the conversation, but at least 4 of us would have to express interest. Just curious to whether that's something that we would want to do. Some city manager will likely be following back up with the clerk on that matter. I think it's important. It's important for the council who thought it important to create this housing opportunity ordinance to be able to provide some input and some feedback on that, the vision, the desire, what we'd like to see. So you can expect to hear more from us and to have requests to have further discussion at our special meeting coming up.
Great. Committee member comments?
Well, we know you're in a hurry.
This meeting, any staff comments?
Can we adjourn to the 26th if
Yes,
we have items?
Yes, but I have any staff comments? No? If not, we're going to be adjourning this meeting to November 26th.
November 26th, great.
Great. Thank you.